Last March, my roommate Patrick died unexpectedly in his sleep. He seemed like a really healthy guy, but he had a heart defect that no one knew about. He was only 23, just a few years younger than me. I went to his funeral and helped his sisters pack up all his stuff. I even went to the doctor for the first time in years, just to see if I had any undiagnosed conditions. Thankfully, everything came back fine. The doctor said that if I kept exercising and eating right, I'd live a long, healthy life. Unfortunately, I had relied on Patrick to pay half the rent, and I wouldn't be able to stay in the apartment without finding another roommate. I know it's morbid to keep living in a place where someone died, but I didn't want to move. My place was in a great part of the city, and I felt really close to all our neighbors. Every week, the little old lady next door would pop in and give us homemade tamales. It was the perfect apartment. So I posted a room for rent on Craigslist. I included a couple pictures of the room and asked my brother to help me write the text. We kept everything positive, but my brother convinced me to add one sentence at the end explaining that there had been a death in the room. I didn't want to include that, but my brother said that we were legally obligated to. Not surprisingly, we didn't get many offers, and the few offers that we did get tried to negotiate a lower price because of the death. Eventually, I got an email from a guy named Max who said he was willing to pay the full amount. I invited him to come over and have a look. When he showed up at my front door, I was shocked at how handsome he was. He was dressed in pastels, like it was Easter or something, and he had this all-American look to him. He was tall and blonde, and he seemed really nice, kinda goofy. He looked around the apartment and asked some questions. Thankfully, he didn't bring up Patrick's death. I assumed it didn't really matter to him. After showing me his references and bank statement, I agreed to let him rent the room. He moved in that night. Things were great at first. He asked me about my job and my family, and he told me a little bit about growing up in Utah. Honestly, I really liked the guy. On the third night, though, he asked if we could watch a movie together. I said sure, and he picked an extremely graphic horror movie. It was not the kind of movie I expected him to like, and the worst part was, he kept laughing at all the bloody death scenes. Then, when the movie was over, he finally asked me about Patrick. I kept things simple, saying that he died peacefully in his sleep, and Max dropped the subject. After that, he spent more and more time in that room. Our walls are pretty thin, and I could hear him walking around at night. Sometimes I could hear him muttering to himself. This went on for about a week, until one day, when I got home early and I found the apartment empty. I called out for Max, but he didn't answer. I figured he was out for the day. But I noticed the smell of smoke coming from his room. I worried that something was wrong, so I knocked on his door. When he didn't answer, I got my extra key and opened it. What I saw inside made me gasp. All the walls were covered in strange, satanic-looking markings. A pentagram had been painted on the floor, and at the foot of the bed, he'd set up some kind of shrine with a photo of Patrick at the center. It was surrounded by black candles, all burning. What was going on? Was Max in some kind of cult? I rushed in there, careful to step around the pentagram, and blew out the candles. Then, I closed and locked the door. I stood in the living room for a long time. I had no idea what to do. Max didn't do anything illegal, so I couldn't call the cops. But I also didn't want to live with someone like that. I decided to sit on the couch and wait for him to come back and explain himself. I didn't have to wait long. I heard the door open and Max came in, smiling as usual. "Max," I said, "I saw what you did to the room. You didn't blow out the candles, did you?" he asked. I nodded. His smile instantly disappeared. I'd never seen someone change so quickly. One second, he seemed normal, and the next, he looked completely unhinged. He charged toward me, screaming that I'd ruined everything, that he'd have to start all over. He got right up in my face, and I worried that he'd attack. Then, he stopped. His expression got weirdly calm, and he said, "That's okay. I guess I'll have to start all over, at another death site. "What do you mean?" And he dove for me. I don't know where the dagger came from, but he had it in his hand. He tackled me to the floor and held the blade right over my face. I don't remember what I said. I probably just screamed for him to stop. I knew that he'd been doing some kind of messed up devil worship thing on the spot where Patrick died, and now he was going to kill me and do it all again. I couldn't let him do that. He drove the knife toward me, and I tried to push him away. He was strong, really strong. He was about to stab me when our neighbor walked by the still open front door. She had brought homemade tamales to share with us. She saw Max on top of me and screamed. Max dropped the knife, shoved her out of the way, and ran away. After that, I never saw him again. I cleaned up his room, changed the locks, and prayed that he was gone forever. I still don't know what he was trying to do in Patrick's room. Honestly, I don't want to know. I bought a new car recently, and so I decided to sell my old one. It wasn't worth much, as I bought it secondhand close to 10 years ago. I was sad to see it go, as it never caused me any trouble, and the only reason I bought a new car was because I wanted a newer model. I advertised it on a few different sites, including Craigslist, and over the next few days, I received a few lowball offers. I wasn't in a rush to sell, and I knew what it was worth, so I just disregarded any offers that were unrealistic. After about a week, I received an inquiry from a lady called Rianne, saying she wanted to buy a cheap car for her son, and asked if she could come and take a look. Rianne said the only time she could meet was after 10 p.m., but said I could choose the location. I know most people will probably think that this was a red flag, but I suggested a local Walmart, which I knew would still be open, and there would still be people around. On the night of the meet, Rianne never showed up. I attempted to call her on the number we had spoken on previously, but the phone was switched off. I thought maybe she got held up at work and would soon be on her way. As I was waiting in the car, there was a knock on the window. One man stood right at my door. Another stood behind me in my blind spot. I looked at the man and asked what he wanted. "Are you selling this car?" he asked. This was a very strange statement, as I didn't have any for sale signs on it, nor was there anything else that would indicate me selling the car. No, I'm just waiting for a friend," I said. I didn't really want to get into a conversation with someone I didn't know in the middle of a car park about selling my car. The man turned around and spoke to the other man, who was still standing just out of sight of where I could see him clearly. They spoke for a minute, and without saying anything else to me, both walked off. I watched the direction they walked off in, but they didn't get into a car. They just walked out of the backside of the car park. I waited for 5 more minutes, then decided to leave. As I was exiting the car park, I noticed a car parked up with what looked to be 2 men inside. I glanced up at my rearview mirror as I turned the car straight, and I saw the car turn its lights on and pull out onto the main road behind me. They followed me for several kilometers, and at this point I was driving without direction, aimlessly taking left and right turns to make sure they were following me. As I turned the next corner, I saw a police car sitting outside a diner. I pulled into the car park and pulled up next to the police car. As I did, I saw the car slowly drive past. One of the men was clearly looking in my direction, and as they passed, the car picked up speed and drove away. I didn't waste any time. I drove out of the car park and headed back the way I came. I have no idea why they were following me, or if they were anything to do with Rianne. The car isn't worth a lot of money, so I don't understand why they would want to jack me, or if they intended to follow me home and break into my house. I'm not sure of their intentions, but I'm glad I never found out. This happened to me just as the pandemic broke out back in 2020. With everyone panic buying and talks of a full lockdown, I decided to try and look for some fitness gear so I could use this time to get into shape. I lived alone, and this meant that I was going to be spending some considerable amount of time on my own if the lockdown really did go ahead. I browsed Craigslist and found some gym equipment, such as a bench, barbell, and dumbbells, and a few other things. It all looked to be in great condition, and the seller, Luna, said I could have them for $200 cash as she no longer had the time for them and needed the money, and she would even drop them off for me. It seemed like a great deal, so I agreed and sent Luna my address. Luna turned up the next day and showed me all the gear, and I paid the $200 cash, and she left. I set it all up in my garage, made the most of it for a few days, and then I received a call from an unknown number. It was a man saying that the gym equipment I had recently bought off Luna was his, and he needed it all back. I obviously said it wasn't my problem. I paid for it, the sale was final, and he should take it up with Luna. The man got angry on the phone and said if I didn't give it back to him, he would fuck me up and knew where I lived. I hung up the phone. I didn't really know what to do, because if this equipment was actually his and he could prove it, then I would be down $200. I didn't even ask for a receipt, but it never even occurred to me buying through Craigslist. I called Luna, and she said she was sorry, but had already sent the money, and that it was her ex Fabio that was calling me, and he was crazy, and I should give the stuff back, and she would pay me back when she could. That night, I was in bed when I heard a loud crash come through my bedroom window. I ran to the window, trying not to stand on any of the broken glass, and saw a man standing on my lawn. He waited there until he knew I had seen him, and then turned and walked away. He didn't even say or gesture anything, but I knew it was Fabio. It would have been too much of a coincidence to be anyone else. I reported it to the police and explained the situation, but they just said there was very little they could do without evidence the two were related. The next day, I received another call from an unknown number. I decided not to answer, and a few minutes later, I was notified of a voicemail.
Did you get the message? Next time, I won't be so nice, so make sure all my gear is on the lawn at 9 p.m., or else it'll be more than your window that gets broken.
I did wonder whether I should get some of my bros to come over and wait for him to turn up, but what would stop him from coming back and burning down my house while I slept? I decided to give the stuff back. It wasn't worth the trouble to me. I left it all on the lawn, and at exactly 9 p.m., a black pickup pulled up at the end of my drive and took it all away. A few days later, I saw the exact same ad from Luna selling the same equipment. They were scamming people. I have to admire the genius. Make a sale for a couple of $100, no receipt or digital trace, and then offer to drop it off so you know where they live, but they don't know where you live, and then play the crazy X card. I reported it to Craigslist, but there's very little stopping them from just creating another account in another name and doing the same thing. Luna probably wasn't even her real name.